These are the top 10 Yusuke fights from Yu Yu Hakusho. Bang! Spirit gun. So the first fight, you know, number 10, Yusuke versus Suzuka. See, or Suzaku, my bad. See, Suzaku was the leader of the Saint Beast. He was the Lightning Beast. He liked to play games with thunder. He shocked the fuck out of Yusuke. Not just shocked. Nigga had, voltages, watts of electricity going through his body during this fight. So he, oh my god, he was really getting fucked up. But he was fighting through it. Yusuke, is still like, he grinds hard during a fight. He doesn't fucking play games. He was throwing haymakers on this guy. Like he, at first, because Suzuku was playing games and trying to assess his opponent too. Yusuke was, getting some blows in. And he's like, okay, I have to like play a distance game with this animal because he's actually kind of, fierce. And he hit him with then that's when he started hitting him with a lot of lightning, and he started, losing. He tried to grab the flute, but he couldn't. And then he got shocked to death, basically, like almost died during this fight. But he saw Keiko and Botan, and he was like, these girls need my help. I can't allow these insects to run around. If I kill this guy, then I can, get them out of there. I can get them out of there. And then after that, he killed Suzuka and he won that fight. It was one of the hardest fights he had. Number 9 is Yusuke versus Rando. See, Rando's the killer of 99 sidekicks. Genkai was 100. He was like, I need 100. This this is, what I live for. She's gonna die and I'm gonna get her powers and shit. Yusuke was like, you can't do that. That's uncalled for and shit. You've killed too many psychics already. You ain't getting hers. We won't let that happen. During the fight, Rando mimicked, the spirit gun. Yusuke was like, damn. He got hung over a sea of piranhas. He fell into them. Kuwabara dives in. Kuwabara's soul leaves his body and goes down to save Yusuke. Yusuke hops out of the water. Boom. And he has one more spirit gun in the tank, and he's like, take this, you little bitch. Hit him with that spirit gun. And he was out. Is what he thought, but then he got back up. He tried to shrink Yusuke, but he shrunk himself because he forgot how that specific psychic spell worked. And then Yusuke squashed him, and that's how he defeated Rando. Rando is, a guy who's, similar in strength to Suzuka. So it was a good fight. Yusuke versus Jin. Jin the Windmaster. He was in the Dark Tournament. They fought them when they fought against, the Shinobi of Spirit World. Jin was, flying around and shit, during this fight. He showed Yusuke what the true power of wind could do. He couldn't quite touch him, and Yusuke even got thrown out of the ring for a second. Jin kept going up in the sky and summoning tornadoes and shit. Yusuke had to be time his punch just right and hit him right where it fucking hurts, in the gut. Boom! And hit him real fucking hard there. And basically knocked the wind out of him. And he was like, oh fuck. Spirit wave technique, to get shit away. He used spirit gun too, and it bounced off. It redirected upwards because of the power of Jin's wind punch, wind cyclone punch, where it goes like this. you know, and after that, Yusuke had a new friend in Jin, the Windmaster. They became friends, and he showed up for the next tournament too later on. But number 7 is Yusuke versus Raizen when he got to Demon World. Yusuke he was mad. He had a chip on his shoulder because he was like, Raizen took over my body when I was fighting against Sensui, and I never got to see what I was actually capable of. He played games with my life, essentially. So he wanted to go see what the fuck was going on. This guy is one of the kings of Demon World, so he's one of the most powerful demons. But he didn't care because his body was, taken over by this guy, and he was playing games too much. So, Yusuke went down there and he, tried to handle business as usual, but, Raizen is one of the most powerful demons in the series. So, Yusuke did get humbled, but he got, he sat down and other things, but he was able to move Raizen out of the seat. Raizen didn't think he could, but he was able to, with the spirit gun. He had to dodge that. And that's one of them, right? I got number 6. I got Yusuke versus Hiei, the first fight. Yusuke versus Hiei. Hiei, I stole Keiko. Keiko Yukimura Keiko. And he was like, I'll turn her into one of my slaves, if you can't stop me. Yusuke was like, that won't happen. I won't let that happen. And they fought each other. Hiei, when he went into his full demon state, he had eyes everywhere on his body, not just on his head. And he was green. He had a green body, and he was running around like. And Yusuke was like, "Oh fuck, this guy's moving fast." Kurama even showed up to back him up a little bit because Kurama, had to defend the girls because Yusuke was, he was getting kept the fuck up. But Yusuke saw the forlorn hope and he bounced the spirit gun off the mirror and it hit him. And that's how he ended up defeating, Hiei the first time. And they fought again, but it was just, to see if Yusuke was actually like that. And he was. But number 5 is, Yusuke versus Chu. See, he was the leader of Team Rikuyukai. With Rinku and Zero and all that weak ass bitches. He was like, man, you guys kept me out of the tournament. You try to keep this bloke out of the tournament. You can't do shit like that. He wears a mohawk and he drinks a lot. That's what woke Yusuke up. He was like, damn, this smells like home. I smell booze and I don't like it. And it's like, don't blame it on me if you're too drunk and you lose the fight. And he's like, okay, yeah, we'll see about that. And, they were, fighting for a while too. They brought out the, moves and shit. And then they, went into what's called a knife edge death match. So they put that knife on their heel and then they fought. They couldn't move past that knife, They fall back on the knife, their heel falls back on it and it cuts them. It lets them know that they have to move forward and punch their opponent. They can't move outside of that area. And it's a small area, and they just have to keep hitting each other. And Yusuke was the one who ended up winning that bout. It was cool. It was the first fight he had in the Dark Tournament, and he won that fight. And then Chu was also a friend that he, could, spar against later on, and, had his back when, Yusuke decided to create the Demon World Tournament. So that was cool, too. But number 4 is Yusuke versus Kamiya. See, Yusuke versus Dr. Kamiya. Dr. Kamiya had, insects in the hospital. Basically, he played games, basically. He manipulated the situation. So, he's a doctor, right? And he's working in a hospital, but these people are all sick. And they're like, we need Dr. Kamiya here. And Kamiya is the one who's, making everybody sick. and they're trying to find him and shit. And they ended up finding him because uh, is his name Shido? God damn, the guy who does the shadow territory, he got grabbed up. Kamiya like hit him with and his chakra points, his pressure points, and he like fell to the ground like, oh shit. He tried to like let Yusuke know, but he was paralyzed. He was like, you need to, get out of here, or the guy's right there behind you. And he was like, okay, we can't play games no more. You can't fuck around in this hospital doing shit like that. We'll have to like settle this shit. And Yusuke was like actually winning that fight, but like the Kamiya had ways about him, right? So his territory allowed him to do anything a doctor could do. So he was able to give himself serotonin, dopamine, you know, turn off his pain receptors, and keep on fighting. So he was like, I have an adrenaline rush and all kind of shit. He's like, I'm feeling good today. I'm feeling good, even after getting his ass whipped by Yusuke. Yusuke's like, man, I've been holding back. Like, I could kill you with one punch, because he is like that powerful, and he's like, man, I still need to do this for Sensui, and because we humans are not cool. And Yusuke was like, this is done. He even shot his arm off and shit too to try to like make him stop, but he wouldn't stop. So he had to punch him outside the window like really fucking hard, and he landed in the fucking yard. And then um, Genkai went up to him and like shocked him awake, like, psst, psst, and resuscitated him. He was like, because Yusuke was like, I ain't trying to like have a fucking life on my, because I ain't trying to kill humans. I live to kill demons and shit. This is not what I'm trying to do. I ain't trying to take his life. Yeah. So she, kept him alive and shit. And then at number, damn, at number 3, I have Yusuke versus Yomi. That was the last fight Yusuke had. So Yusuke, had to fight against Yomi in the Demon World Tournament. Yomi was already pissed because he lost all of his shit. Like, he gave up his title as one of the Demon Kings to fight in the tournament as a individual demon. On the that he could win the tournament possibly, and then take over all of Demon World, because it was the Demon Tournament was for that purpose, to decide who the Demon King was going to be. And Yusuke was like, I'd rather you not have that, you know. But he was also like, why am I fighting? Yusuke like stopped everything and just like zoned out during the fight. And then Yomi was like, are you serious? You fucking played games with me? You made me give up my title as king and everything to fight you in this tournament, and you're telling me you don't know why you want to fight me anymore? Like, you, you can't do shit like that, you know? Why the fuck am I here fighting you? Yeah, you can't do that. You better get up and fight. And he did, and he pulled out his demon energy and everything, and it was, a close fight, and it was really close too. But, you know, what kept Yomi on his feet was his son. He heard the sound of his son, and he was like, he wasn't gonna fall and shit. And Yusuke was like, damn, that's how he was able to be. That shit's crazy. That's how Yusuke lost, but it was a good fight, and he did enough damage to Yomi to where he couldn't win the tournament, like the whole tournament. So it worked out in the end. And number 2 is Yusuke versus Toguro in the Dark Tournament. There was a lot of things leading up to that fight. The first fight they had at Tarukune's compound, but Yusuke didn't understand that Toguro was not going all out. That wasn't Toguro, it was only 20%, and they were having problems with it. He showed him 30% in like to let him know, you have to train for the next couple months to go into the Dark Tournament, because that's where you are gonna die. But we want to see what you can do. I want you to prove that you can defeat me. You know, Toguro has, he's a demon, but he used to be a human. You know, I talked about his life and shit, right? But Toguro versus Yusuke was, scary. People in the stands were dying because when Toguro went to his like full powered form, he started spamming phantoms from his, pores. And he was started killing like all kind of fucking demon spectators and almost killed, people that were on Yusuke's side. They were like, put your energy up so you can like keep that shit at bay real quick. You won't die. You know, and that's what happened. They kept them at bay. But Yusuke was fighting against a girl. He needed a kick in the rear from Genkai. She was dead. So she came through Pooh, his little, bird, and he was like, oh, she was like, you gotta like get your head in the game. This is like not a game. You're fighting not just for yourself. You're fighting for your friends' lives now too. Kuwabara had to act like he was dead for Yusuke to get serious and finally, shoot off that that spirit gun at Toguro, and after that, Toguro was gone. you know, he died. He was like, "You finally killed me," and then like his body was like, it was so. Oh my god, you watch that? Like, go. Oh my god, his body was so fucking disgusting afterwards. Like his body was like his muscle because he's like a muscular demon, so like his muscles were essentially ripped and shit, and he was like he turned all white and shit's just gross as fuck. But that's how he died. He tanked the spirit gun, but he didn't really tank it because yeah, you just gotta watch it. But Yu Hakusho is a great show, and number one fight is Yusuke versus Sensui. So Yusuke fought against Sensui, and Sensui was a spirit detective too, like Yusuke at one point in his life. But he turned a new leaf when he found that humans were also doing all kind of fucked up shit to each other. I was told that I need to fight these demons because they're bad, and everybody told me that. But maybe these demons ain't all bad. Maybe it's us too, and we're fucked up too. And that's what he was going on and on about. But Yusuke was like, you didn't do your job right. Now I'm here to take your job and like remove you from destroying this world that well, I care about. See, Sensui didn't care about that world anymore because he was already dead. So he was like, I might as well go through with all this, mass murder and other things because I'm not going to be alive in a couple, weeks anyways. And he was like, oh, wow, you know, that's, that's what you want, you know. And Yusuke, he ended up bringing out the Muzaku for him, you know. And it wasn't, because, he wanted to. It's because of the story, though, too. So he died in the tunnel, and then he came back to life with the demon powers. His heart wasn't ticking, but that's how a demon heartbeat is. The fight, was like all he was worried about. And he got down to Demon World and he was on par with Sensui. But then, once Raizen took over, it was like a different game. Like he was like Sensui was basically a child compared to, Raizen, inside of Yusuke's body. That's the most powerful character in the series too, by the way. I made videos about that shit, man. Yeah. He got rid of him. He dismissed him with the spirit gun or a demon gun, actually. And Yusuke was like, "Oh fuck, you're dead now. I wasn't trying to kill you. I was trying to beat you, but you know, somehow like I wasn't in control of my body." But then Sensui was like, "No, no, it was you. It was just a demon version of you who did this to me." And he was like, "Oh shit, are you serious?" And then they went their own ways and other stuff. But that was the best fight, was Yusuke versus Sensui. See, you all watch Yu Yu Hakusho to know what I'm talking about. I think they took it off of Netflix now. I'm like, what the fuck? Y'all playing games. But you gotta promote other animes and stuff. I understand, but you know, still, man, you gotta watch Yu Yu Hakusho somehow. Know somebody who knows about it, like me, like just me, probably. You know, I know about it. Other people know about it too. It's one of those classic ones. It was on Toonami back in the day. All right, but stay cool, Kwam the corner.